Right, well, let's make a start. Hi, I'm Corinne, the Managing Director of Ethical Sales. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar today. I'm delighted that you could join us and my very special guest panel. So ethical sales, we take the sting out of sales for purpose-driven businesses. And I'm really delighted and honoured that Ollie and Laura can take the time today to spend talking about mission-driven, purpose-driven sales and share their experiences and stories with us. Unfortunately, Jessica Hegren, who is the founder of That Works For Me, was going to join us, but she is poorly with COVID. So we wish Jess all the best and hope that she gets better soon. And I think that leads me on to my first point, really, about how disrupted we've all experienced a lot of disruption over the last 2 years with the pandemic and other challenges. And I think as salespeople, as people working in business development or looking at the growth of our businesses, it can be a really challenging time. And I think particularly for trailblazing businesses that are trying to disrupt the status quo, like Compare Your Footprint and Arenko Group, it's a challenge. We've gone from having to pivot, a lot of the sales approaches we were doing to virtual, and now we're moving back into face-to-face. And sort of what does that mean for us all as salespeople? And I know from experience, having spoken to a large number of businesses the last 6 months or so, many of them are not where they want to be growth-wise as a result of the last couple of years. So I'm really excited for this session. I hope that we're all going to take some very useful inspiration and action points away with us. I would like it to be as interactive as possible. So please use the chat to ask questions and introduce yourselves. And I will do my very best to facilitate and chair this hour session that we've got so that we can cover off as many topics as possible. I've got 3 questions for the panelists, so I'm going to be working through these questions. But first of all, I'd just like Ollie and Laura to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their business mission. So Ollie, would you be able to make a start, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Corinne. And great to be here today as well. But just a little bit about myself. So I started out as an environmental engineer in a technical role, and then moved sort of through the years in increasingly commercial roles. That's both in the UK and overseas. It's always been, I guess my focus has always been in new business. It's always been in new products and sort of new markets. So it's always been around green tech because of my roots in environmental engineering. And often about taking those new products and services into new markets. As in terms of the mission and purpose of Compare Your Footprint as part of the Green Element Group, we really want to empower all organizations of all sizes to be calculating their carbon footprint of their entire operations, using science-based targets, and then supporting as a result that acceleration towards more sort of a just transition to a more low carbon and sustainable world. And that's the sort of the figurehead statement that's at the top of everything we do and is throughout the organization, whether it's the sales or operations teams, and sort of what we live by to try and achieve anyway, Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ollie. And yeah, a really important part of the sustainability drive is giving businesses that ability to track what they're doing. So it's such important work that you're doing. Laura, would you be able to introduce yourself and Arenko Group's mission?
Yeah, sure. And also really excited to be here today to talk about this. I think it's a great topic. So I'm Laura Hield-Ryder. I'm the Director of Sales Operations at Arenko. I started out in marketing back nearly 20 years ago in the energy industry, so in energy supply, fairly low engagement area, and I've been in sales and marketing roles ever since, with a common thread of sort of balancing customer, colleague and commercial priorities, and trying to really focus on outcomes for getting a great customer experience and also developing people. That's another one of my passions. Arenko, we are a software company, and we operate in a fairly niche area of the energy sector, and our software enables the control and optimization of commercial scale batteries, currently in the UK and soon to expand into the US. So that's about enabling more renewable assets to come onto the energy grid. And our mission is to therefore enable tomorrow's infrastructure by delivering on our vision which is to unlock the value of low carbon energy assets worldwide through software.
Brilliant, thank you. You explained that well. I remember when we met to discuss this webinar, understanding exactly what Arenko does is a challenge, but I think you explained that really well. I suppose that
I think I took our conversation and thought, yeah, I need to simplify how I describe that.
Yeah, and I think that maybe takes us quite nicely onto our first question, which is that whole big meaty question around how important do we think mission and purpose is in sales conversations, and how you get that across in what you're doing. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so we can sort of focus on the speakers. And then if I could ask Ollie, if you could kick us off with the answer to this, or your contribution to this first question, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problems. So I think, so one of the things that sort of strikes me about this question is whether it's, obviously as a business, we already have, I guess, a strong moral compass. That was the CEO who developed the business. Had a vision and has a sort of strong principles behind that. But I think the question also really for me is in a way almost a best practice question as well, because I feel it's relevant irrespective of the business you have to have this mission and purpose in your sales conversations. And I think why is that? There's a few things I'll always refer back to through today in terms of how this approach underpins a lot of the conversations you're having. But for us, this is about providing more transparency and creating trust with the buyers in the conversation. And I think when you say these things and you look at things like, how is this so important quite specifically? Well, if you end up with this alignment across the business and within your business team, your new business team, your accounts team, and within your operations team, then you're going to end up with all of the conversations coming from the same direction. And this means, in terms of those conversations you're having, for us, the greatest impact it has is uncovering new opportunities and qualifying those opportunities, to use a word that's pretty generic, but making sure as well that when those opportunities close, retaining and growing the revenue from those clients. So if you get that correct, and at the very early days, and you're aligned with beliefs, that means also it's highly likely that the businesses you're talking to are already going to see some alignment there. It's likely that those conversations will become more meaningful, more quickly. It means that you're going to be qualifying better opportunities as a result. It means that when they close, as you've already got that alignment through your sales process, it's very likely those businesses will stay with you for longer. It's more likely they'll come back to you for more business. So that's why for me it's so important, obviously for our business, but I believe it applies quite to any business sector. And I talk about I mentioned three areas, and I won't, as much as I won't mention the texts and things rather than plugging other people's literature. But if anyone's read it, they may well feel these are familiar statements, but they apply, I feel, a lot with the way we're having these conversations, and especially when we come to some of the later questions, this is relevant. But there are three things that I'm looking for in conversations with clients for any salespeople. The sincerity in the conversation you're having, the competency of the person in that conversation, and your consistency in terms of through that sales process. And those three things, they're really key. So by having mission and purpose in your sales conversations, For me, it's super important because it ensures sincerity, confidence, and consistency. That means, and this is going to ring true for anyone, this means better qualified opportunities, larger deal sizes, more qualified deals being won, and a shorter sales cycle because you're going to have better trust from the client.
Thanks, Ollie. I mean, there's so much we could unpick there, but I think I'll just let Laura give her thoughts as well before we maybe talk a bit more around this. So, Laura, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I think so. For me, the mission and purpose in a sales conversation is really important. I guess similar to what Ollie just said, though, at Arenko, sustainability is a core value of the business, and it sort of then translates, into, I guess, the people that we hire and that kind of thing. We're operating, as I said, in quite a niche area of the energy industry. So, our target customers are people who own or are about to own commercial scale battery assets. There's not a huge amount of those in the country. So I guess we've got that sort of implicit alignment. They're in that business to facilitate, I guess, the development of the electricity grid. And again, implicit in that is the alignment with our values and our mission of developing that infrastructure. So I think it does help us. It is a bit easier, I guess, for us to identify that common purpose between the company and the client. But more so, I think it's about targeting the right people who believe in the mission, who are there to sort of be those brand ambassadors and develop those relationships with customers. So, and for me, where that alignment is in place between the person and the salesperson and the client, obviously that's where the best deals and relationships happen. We're heavily relationship deal based in our approach. But it's also, for me, it's about recognizing that we're in this business to make money and make money for our clients. And that actually delivers on our mission and purpose as well, to bring more renewables onto the grid. So it's actually, I think, less important to bring out that explicit mission and purpose into every sales conversation, because it's kind of an underlying piece there, and is more of a sort of helps us more with the attracting the right people and having that underlying motivation within the business to put that right sort of message and branding across, I guess.
That's a good point, Laura, that for a lot of purpose-driven businesses, it will be running through hopefully everything that they do in sales and the way that they market themselves. And I think one of the things that I notice can happen quite a lot with particularly with sort of purpose-driven businesses is that they're quite clear on their mission and purpose, actually, but sometimes it's about sort of transcending that and trying to think about what that isn't always enough to sort of get that prospect or buyer interested.
Absolutely. And I think just to pick up in Jess's absence, really, because actually she's kind of sold to me, or I've passed her on to our people team because I really, I believed in her sort of business purpose, but it's about solving a need for the customer ultimately. And, so we had a great conversation about her business, and, we've got hiring requirements at the moment, we're scaling up rapidly, so it sort of made sense. So she offers sort of a flexible hiring and recruitment approach. And I think for me, what came across was her passion and motivation, and therefore the purpose of the business. But she was also sort of linking that to the customer benefit, if you like, the benefit for me and the wider the wider piece. But it's also, I think, you know, she came across therefore as really natural and authentic, and you know, so it builds trust quickly, and as in a more, you know, natural sales approach, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that fits with your, you know, your point, Ollie, about the 3 areas that you always want to sort of focus in on with that approach, which is sincerity is the first one. But I suppose with that comes, well, I mean, do you agree? Do you think the sincerity is part of helping to solve that, you know, that problem, and actually find, you know, trying to find out more about what their pain points are?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of this is all to try more quickly cut through those early stages and get to a real business conversation. And I think if you're able then to make a connection, you know, we're not here talking about building relationships in the sort of the friendship sense, but very much we're trying to make a connection here and have a common business understanding of those requirements. And I think if you have the ability to get through to those people, you know, to that point as quickly as possible, then you're going to end up with far more effective conversation, both for yourself and for the prospect. So yeah, that's what it's more about. It's I guess it's, you know, another way some people may say is about sort of having a, you know, quite a disarming approach and fronting issues, that kind of approach. So obviously within sales, you have different personalities, and everyone within a sales team draws on their particular personalities effectively in their own way to do their job. But I think you can still take these things and take the same approach to you know, by being more upfront and clear with people about intentions, by, you know, understanding that better more quickly. You know, that's a level of sincerity is important. And let's not forget that everyone is human, and empathy is an important feature within human personality. So again, that's something we're trying to do, is, you know, make genuine engagements, you know, with people. So that's what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you just said there, because I think this kind of can get to the root of the sales issues that a lot of that I see anyway, is that thing about you do need to be upfront about why you're making the approach. And, you know, that's why my team, we talk a lot about, you know, when we do pick up the phone and we have those cold approaches, which is sometimes necessary, it's about not being apologetic about that. It's about being respectful of somebody's time, but also, you know, being upfront and honest about why you're making the phone call in the first place. And I think that people, all buyers, no matter where they're coming from, will respond to that sincerity, definitely. And I think that leads me on really well to the kind of next question, which is about what sales activities do you specifically engage in as purpose-driven businesses, and what do you find are most successful? And I know from experience that this is something that a lot of businesses struggle with, in terms of what do we actually, you know, where do we even start? And I think any sort of learnings you can share from even things you've tried that haven't worked, I think would be really helpful here. Laura, could you maybe kick us off with that?
Yeah, sure. And I think so Arenko's been around since 2014, but actually we've only really started, the business sort of took a pivot a few years ago. We started off as a battery developer, realized that was, you know, capital intensive, and that the value was in the software. So we've pivoted to focus on our software. And therefore we're only in like quite early stages really of commercializing our product. And to date, the majority of our customers have come from sort of inbound requests, or you know, wanting us to sort of participate in tenders, because we're, again, in a niche industry, and, you know, seen as market leaders in what we do, which is great. You know, being able to build that position. So I guess the way that the approach that we take is, or to date, has been sort of about, you know, responding to tenders and making sure that we include that mission, you know, the business purpose and mission in that tender response, and making sure that the language that we use is, I guess, showing our progressive approach and thinking to that. to the problem that we're trying to solve. There's definitely work to do on the language of responses. So we're sort of, me and a couple of our sort of commercial analysts are working on refining those responses so that they're even clearer and, you know, show I guess our strategic intent to improve our overall tone and strategic response. Responding to inbound requests, we do that so via email and sort of following up with intro calls. I guess the approach there is quite pretty sort of standard, I guess. We don't tend to lead with or include anything about our mission or vision there, because, as I've said before, it's sort of implied in, you know, what we do and in the area that we work in. So for us, events are quite important, and I think we've seen, I guess, you know, COVID impact of that in terms of lack of in-person events. In the last couple of years, we attended our first in-person event in February of this year, and that was really helpful to sort of identify key relationships and sort of start a bit more of, I guess, outbound approach to identifying a broader sort of a broader base of prospects, but also like sort of different angles that we can use to sell our products. And one of the key things I think I just wanted to pick up on in terms of our next steps, was something that I think we haven't done very well or really at all to date, and we're just sort of starting this, is LinkedIn and sort of kicking off an employee posting group, because, you know, we've got we're working at the cutting edge often of controlling assets and in the electricity grid, and so we've got a lot of technical expertise in our business. We're trying to sort of put that across and maintain our market leading position, and for me it's about sort of building out that that brand awareness initially and recognition for our expertise in the market. And I think, you know, a LinkedIn approach is going to be critical to us. So we've started sort of focusing on how we engage our technical experts as well, to sort of post and put that, you know, in a positive light for the company, and sort of bring out our mission as part of that. But I guess the other point there for me is about putting across that. So for me, I believe that everybody is a salesperson. They might not know it or want to be that, because, you know, sales can often be or can be a dirty word, I guess, for some people. But for me, you know, I think it's about if you've got that passion and, you know, that really strong tie to the company mission, it's for me that's sort of an easier sell really to internal people, I guess, to be able to promote the product. So for me, it's about sort of promotion initially, and then sort of building those relationships. So yeah, LinkedIn is the place that we're going to be focusing on a bit more closely next, and then, you know, on the back of that, also sort of starting in earnest our outreach, and that's, you know, using lead lists and trying to think about the way that we're going to do that, to, you know, as you said, put across our purpose, but in a sort of more yeah, making sure that's in an authentic way to engage and get that hook early on, I guess.
Thanks, Laura. That's great. I mean, you covered, you know, a lot there in a short response, but you know, a lot of, I would say, for B2B sales, that, you know, the key sort of focus areas. I'd like to talk a bit more about some of what you've said, but Ollie, would you be able to sort of add to that with your 6 learnings, what you guys get up to?
Sure, and thanks for that. And maybe slightly in contrast, because as a business, we don't really respond to tenders because we're not in a mature market space at all in that sense. So we're starting to see tenders coming through now, but at least for the last 9 months, I would say that most of those people requiring those services have still been trying to define the requirement. So we haven't been seeing RFIs, although I'm starting to see more now. So I think that, you know, our approach very much has been probably quite similar, again, to a lot of traditional approaches, more the way you do it, I guess, rather than what it is, you know, you do specifically. And And so, we look for referrals. I think similar to Laura, a lot of the business to date has come from personal network referrals, inbound leads. We're very, very heavily involved with social media. Most of, I would say, our marketing team, 3/4 of the emphasis in our marketing team is around social media content and comms and that sort of thing, rather than kind of traditional direct marketing activity. When they took me on, I would say that's the first time we started to take a more proactive approach and direct marketing approach. Before then, it's all the businesses come from referrals. But yeah, in terms of the type of activities, things that maybe I find not really work so much in the past, and sometimes are seen as, I don't know, maybe there's a, as a useful way to collect leads, but certainly something which we've not been using as much now is events, traditional events. Okay, there has been a shift to move online for sure, with the last few years, and I think the buying process has changed and selling process has changed, but definitely I've always been a little bit cautious around events because of the huge time requirement they have, and especially remembering that I've always been in new market areas. So less, I think they perform a very useful function where you're in very mature markets and you have a presence, and it's more about maintaining brand presence. But if you're entirely new, there's a requirement for speed that, I don't find traditionally I used to get from events, because, whereas maybe you go along to an event to build lead lists to follow up, I actually found that more effective ways of doing that using traditional direct marketing approaches, and use in a sort of using in a quality way, had more results on that. So our approach now with events is very much picking and choosing very carefully about the quality of the events, and then making sure when we do turn up to those events, it's not about building lead lists. These events are much more about content, proper level, proper conversations and good referrals, and then taking what we benefit from that, from that event, and then moving that to quality content online that then informs what I would call maybe, a more enriched direct outbound approach based on that. And so, that would drive things like, the purpose-driven content, I could call it that we produce. And, an example of that might be, the recent home working emissions paper that the consultants identified as a requirement. So, they built a methodology around that. They wrote a paper, which we then published, allowed access publicly. And then it's about how we then repurpose that content and leverage it to have better conversations. So the events really drive content and meaningful connections, not so much about driving leads for us. Leads are still traditionally, and they need to be given the speed at which we need to grow. It's still, I'll be honest, it still needs direct human conversations are the best things that we can have. They're the most immediate, and whether that's through social media, like using LinkedIn, whether it's through sort of email or best face-to-face, but now like this, on Teams, or for phone calls, they still prove to me the most effective. I don't know, when we're at an early stage anyway.
And can I just jump back in there, because I think I completely agree, and I think the events that we are looking at now as Arenko are very specific. So we're in the energy storage world. We went to the energy storage summit, so they're really targeted. And I guess it was more about that event this year was more about sort of demonstrating our expertise and position in the market more than sort of generating leads necessarily. And it was more of a sort of, I guess for us, it was more of a test and learn, because it's the first in-person event we've been to. But I think that really resonated, what you said about the content and following that up. And again, we're, we've only had our first marketing hire early this year, so we're at the early stages of developing our content, and it's definitely not in the place that I want it to be just yet. So, but that's a really good point, I think, in terms of translating what you get from an event and then following that up with content.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, and I'm kind of smiling to myself here because I wrote a blog earlier this year about the kind of ethical sales trends we might see, and you've just sort of covered them off between you. So, that strategic approach to face-to-face events and networking, I think we're going to see more and more of. When I asked the community what percentage, where they were going to focus their sales efforts. 70% were still saying very much virtual. But when you do go out, it's got to be strategic. You've got to have all hands on deck to really make the most of that cost to the business of sending people out and what you're going to do to bring it back. And the other thing you both talked about quite a lot is that whole content marketing and how so important that is now for B2B businesses. So I called it smarketing, but it's like that merging of, you need the sales team to be aligned, with what the marketing team are sending out, and have those open conversations and make sure that you're really supporting one another, because you're all trying to do the same thing. I just wanted to touch on LinkedIn a bit more, because again, that's something that I have seen strongly in the last 6 months or so, is clients saying to me, only just this week, we are going to have an employee focus on LinkedIn and a strategy around that. And if you think about it, it's quite remarkable that it's still one of the only social media platforms that you can organically, grow your reach without having to pay for it. If you do it strategically in the right way, then and you use it in the way that LinkedIn wants you, so you're connecting with the people that you want to be having conversations with, and then putting out content and thought leadership and ideas that speaks to that community, those people, then it's a remarkable platform. And I mean, I was looking at, we've got 22 participants here, but I had over 70 sign up, and a lot of that came from LinkedIn. So, it is a really powerful platform. And I think something that I would strongly recommend any B2B business sort of spend a lot of time thinking about how they can how they can grow their presence and how they can benefit from LinkedIn. So I think that's really, really interesting that you've both mentioned that. I'm just thinking if there's anything else that I wanted to touch on, but
couldn't agree more though on that, Corinne. LinkedIn is like 100% essential tool now for B2B sales. It's definitely, especially in the last 2 years. I think about the traditional ways that we used to build lists, qualify, the old school ways of sort of, what do? You buy a mass load of data. I don't know, you segment your market by zip code, 35,000 lines, probably inaccurate because most of that was collected 4 months ago. You then pay for an agency to improve that data set, which I don't know, costs you so much per line. Then you get people, hitting phones pretty inaccurately, probably not having the most high quality conversations. And you think about the cost of that in terms of person hours, man hours on the phone are really expensive. So I think, you think about the shift now to LinkedIn and Sales Nav, and how much more strongly you can segment and search, smaller list sizes, but we're not doing 120 calls a day. What we want here is much, much better calls and real conversations. So we don't mind shorter lists because they're better quality data. It's like a complete evolution. And there'll be something else tomorrow, a new tool. But right now, it's one of the most powerful tools for new business prospecting, I think, in B2B.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, I think data, getting access to good quality data is extremely challenging. And LinkedIn is a great way, is a great tool to sort of shortcut that. And like you say, you don't need large lists. You can keep it niche and you can nurture it. I mean, there's a business that we're going to be working with shortly, and our recommendation for them was 100% strategy is about LinkedIn lead nurturing. So it's about helping them with a content strategy and making sure that they're having a presence on the platform. And then it's about looking at their wish list and starting to build those relationships, and it'll all be done through LinkedIn, because there's no real need to do it in any other way. So super powerful. And And I think that many people that are on LinkedIn maybe don't see quite how powerful the engine is or could be for them as well, I think. Okay, brilliant. Questions. I'm just going to have a quick look. Someone said, I have a similar question to Neil. Okay. I'm going to leave some questions for the end. So let's do our last question, because I think that's going to be quite a short one to cover off anyway. So my final question was, and it's about, I think it's about the sort of values piece, because that's what a lot of businesses that I speak with really, struggle with. How do we sort of align our values with what we're doing? So my question was, how do you engage, with your sales teams to make sure that they're hitting their targets, and you're also aligning with your business values? And I suppose to sort of explain that a bit more, it's about that uncomfortableness, I think, that some businesses have with, well, we've got these growth goals, but also we don't want to go about sales in a kind of unethical, unprofessional way. So how do we kind of marry the two? Laura, could you kick us off with that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first one for me, I've mentioned it previously, is about recruiting the right people, so the aligned people with your business mission. And so, our recruitment adverts lean on sustainability and sort of our technical achievements and our focus, and bring out our values clearly, I hope, and we sort of reiterate those through the joining journey for new starters. Our core values are ambition, purpose, challenge, excellence, and sustainability. So they sort of, if we're getting that right in terms of the recruitment approach, then that's a good start. I guess the second thing is about making sure we are sharing that mission and vision across the company in all of our business updates. That's something that Arenko has not done very well. And so when I joined, that was a key factor for me to make sure that, again, we're reiterating that mission, because of, the amount of new starters that we've been having over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. But also, I just don't think it can be overstated or overplayed. I think it's important to keep everyone aligned to that. Make sure, again, we can use that everybody as a salesperson kind of thinking and mentality to start that sort of wider promotion. And that obviously can get more challenging as the team, with a larger team and as the team grows. And I think the other challenge for us as Arenko is just being quite frank that because it's a business full of technical experts, basically, at the sort of top of their game. I think sometimes their commercial team, being less technically expert, is not as well respected as it could be. So, I think that's quite a difficult one to overcome, where we're trying to obviously, get that respect internally to then play that back out to our customers. But I think that the real really clear point I wanted to pull out in terms of engaging the sales teams is actually about paying them properly. So I think Ollie and I had a conversation about this last week. So our sales team at the moment is not commissioned, and we're it helps us to sort of do the right thing, I guess, by the customers rather than focus on targets. So we have targets for number of assets rather than the revenue that we get from those. And I guess we're able to do that. It's a bit different for us maybe because we're in startup world kind of thing, and we're early in our commercialization of the product. But that's something that's kind of an ethos I want to try and retain. So, I've got experience from the energy supply business. In fact, I was in sales compliance when the sort of nightmare situation of doorstep selling in the energy industry was happening, and before that was stopped. And I think, then people were focusing on lower income areas and prepayment meters and that kind of thing because it was an easier sell and they had, targets they wanted to fulfill. But actually, for me, it's about making sure that if you get the pay for salespeople right, and don't necessarily link it to the targets, then you can sort of have a better conversation and develop that person in a different way. That's might not always be possible, but I think that's kind of a core principle that I want to try and keep in our company.
Thanks, Laura. That's absolutely fascinating, and I'd love to dig into that a bit more. But Ollie, would you like to give your perspectives on this question?
Yeah, no, sure. And Laura and I were talking about this. It's nice to the idea of paying salespeople properly. I probably mentioned, but no, I think it's true as well, because traditionally there is a role, a classic new business salesperson role, commission based, low basic. Design is make them hungry, get them target focused, and get them moving fast, focused pretty much entirely on numbers. And I think, if you change, so the three things I'm going to mention. So the way we hire, the way we pay, and then the way we're going to be trying to grow the business, because that will evolve. I think we have to be honest about that. So the first thing is when it comes to the mission and purpose of the business, and if that's through everything we do already, things like taking a B Corp status, these kind of things are important, but they're also important to people we employ. So I think when you're already starting on the right foot, if you're trying to hire salespeople who look at your organization, my expectation is that the kind of salespeople that want the jobs that I'm advertising won't be the kind of salespeople that maybe I used to hire 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's important. So their values are different in terms of the way they're motivated as well. So I think that already comes through. So half of my battle is already done there because of the alignment there with mission and purpose, and because of the way the business presents itself to prospective employees. So I think that's strong, the way that comes across. So the way we hire, that's a key thing already to hopefully get the right kind of people. The way we pay, what Laura said, we want to incentivize people, we do, but I think part of what we're doing is trying to also improve that basic salary. But what we have in the business as well is a gain share linked to business performance. So the sales team, and actually a lot of the team, maybe that varies a bit amongst team members, but more or less, people are aligned with the growth of the business. And we're very early stage and we're a high growth business. So this is attractive for salespeople, even mission driven ones. They've got, most of them do have some sort of financial, or even if it's not financial, they're slightly target driven people. They're usually quite competitive. So sometimes it's not just about how much money they're making, but just because they're competitive. I used to have an old boss who called sales a contact sport, and there is still some truth to that. But way we hire impacts that. So we pay based on a better basic, and then more based on the business growth, so linked to that. And then the way we're growing, there is no way that we can maintain growth with just a few people in the business. And in reality, my expectation is that we will be growing our sales team, but probably more likely I'll be outsourcing quite a lot of that. And I think the choices that are available to me now as someone taking on outsourced options like yourself, Corinne, you're in this business, have evolved a lot in the last 10 years, and I have more choice, and I have better choices I can make. So one of those things is obviously how we select that agency that we work with, and making sure that their values are aligned as well, but also their commercial models are changing. So although I expect that some of their team will be incentivized in a more traditional fashion, and I have to appreciate that, and that's the way they operate, but we can still, coming back to what I was saying about the sort of values that we have, the type of conversations, are they proving to show sincerity, consistency, and competency in those calls that they're making, and how are we training those and working with them? So how well aligned is that team? Is it more a partnership commercial model, or is it like 100% commission based? We can influence that. We have more choice. We have more choice of the commercials that we arrange with them. And so one of the things I'm pursuing on that growth side is actually a more equity-based model. So I'll be engaging an agency or possibly engaging an agency which in part are actually taking equity stake in the business. So they're completely aligned with the interests of the growth of the business, but also making sure that those mission and values, they understand that that's important to our business growth as well. That helps alignment. So I think we still can have incentivized models, but I think they've just got a lot more sophisticated and evolved a lot over the last 10 years. And so careful choice, better training, better alignment. As we grow, fingers crossed, we can maintain our values, you know.
Thanks, Ollie. That's brilliant. And I think, you know, both of your responses really sort of highlight the the evolution of the way in which we're thinking about sales within a business. And I think this is particularly important for purpose-driven businesses, or businesses that, you know, consider themselves to be, you know, ethically driven, to really, really think carefully about. I mean, you know, there is a recruitment crisis at the moment. There is no two ways about that. I mean, the number of business development roles and sales roles that are being advertised at the moment is just staggering. And when I look at some of what is being offered, I'm a bit confused really about, you know, who would take that on. And I think that what you've both talked about in terms of really recruiting in the right way and getting that loyalty and trust. And I think that really is key for me, is that when you're building out a great team, you really want to get that loyalty and trust from your people, because that will be what will enable you to grow, and what will make them, you know, pick up that phone or send that email, or really get behind what it is that you're doing. And that's a big part of what I do with ethical sales and my team, to make sure that they're really getting behind the clients that we work with. I think the commission point is really, really interesting debate. And I can sort of see both sides about whether you incentivize or not. But I think the one thing that we do know about sales, particularly something like pure outbound business development exec roles, is that they can get challenging quite quickly, because you know, they're challenging roles to do in the first place. So it's then about how do you sort of nurture and coach and support your people with hopefully doing some sort of more varied roles, and not just pure outbound, because, you know, we've all been there, and it's a challenge to do that 24/7, 5 days a week, isn't it?
I think there's a really important point that you're kind of veering onto here, and I've seen it a lot in salespeople, like burnout. Like our industry can be horrific for burnout, and I think especially with all the mental health awareness that's being raised, I wonder how much of that is now being fed into sales teams. You're right, maybe more varied roles. You know, if we're paying them slightly better basics, we're not always expecting them to be doing a single task. And I understand the arguments for efficiency. You know, I get it. You know, but at the same time, I'd prefer someone to be with me in 2 years' time. You know, and working effectively rather than just a mess, you know. So I think, yeah, it's an industry which can, you know, attract a lot of burnout. And I think as salespeople, we've probably all met people like that, who are highly confident individuals. They're just, you know, done. So I think, you know, we can address that maybe by more variety. Yep, Corinne, that's a really good point.
And like you say, you know, about the choice that a business has in terms of how do they split out their, you know, their sales activities. You know, we work with clients that have got a really strong inbound, and I'll come on to that question in a minute, that inbound approach, and they've got those wheels turning, but actually what they wanted to do was test some outbound methods and to see what worked for them and their type of business. And so they brought us in to do that. It's a kind of lower risk way of trialing a new sales approach. And as you say, there's a lot more choice out there than there was. And there's a lot of amazing agencies specializing either in, you know, digital marketing techniques or more outbound sales approaches. So there's loads you can do there. And just to move on to a couple of questions. So Neil from Stance Agency has said, I'd love to hear how others are attracting inbound inquiries, in particular, how they differentiate their business from another that might not have such a strong mission. So yeah, how do you attract inbound inquiries? That's the kind of holy grail, isn't it, really? If you can get that quality inbound lead.
Yeah, and I think for us today, it's been based on our technical expertise, hence, you know, the focus on our events, and I guess our, you know, we're sort of part of a ranking system of how well different energy assets are doing, but it's definitely we're definitely switching to, as we talked about, sort of the and demonstrating that in places like LinkedIn, but the content marketing strategy for us is going to be key this year to develop that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I think it's about positioning. It's all about positioning your business and trying to get it in front of the people who are going to be interested in what you're offering. And it is a long game. We know that, you know, a kind of strategic content marketing approach, you know, will probably take a reasonable amount of time to yield.
Yeah, and
because
I
that's
guess
how it works. But it's so effective if you do it, isn't it?
Sorry to cut in. And I think that the point that I was thinking about with paying commission as well earlier, and it's the same point here, is that, you know, I guess we're operating in a relatively long sales cycle, so it's kind of 12 months long, and sometimes doesn't happen because the asset doesn't get developed. And so I think there, you know, we've got to do that brand building and reputation building and maintenance of that as well to really keep in the game when you know, when the tenders come out, or when the opportunities arise.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy to get disheartened, isn't it? You know, particularly if you're a smaller business and you're spending a lot of time on your content marketing and you feel like it's not coming to anything, but often it's just about you know, being persistent, and like you say, it can take years to land a new client. And it doesn't matter if you're a B2C business or a B2B, it can still take a long time to get those people in that are sort of hovering around the edges and never really engaging, but actually they are watching you. They're watching everything that you're doing, and they're taking note of every touch point. You know, I think it's something like 7 or 8 touch points that you need to have with the person before they might, you know, think, oh, I know who to speak to about this. You know, it's the long game for sure. Ollie, have you got anything to add there?
Yeah, I'd agree with what you're saying there. Maybe just I'd add specifically to the differentiating piece. So this becomes really hard, you know, but I think you need to be very honest with yourself and very critical about what your value proposition is in the market, that you don't have to do everything. This is super important to understand, is you really need to drill down to what's the word being used before? It's I've tried and avoid cliches, but just you've got to really be critical about what it is. It's very easy, and I've worked in new tech spaces with entrepreneur owners, which will tell me it's amazing and it's the best thing in the world. And I've heard this a lot, you know, and yes, you know, it probably is, but it doesn't mean there aren't other ones which are also useful. And it also doesn't mean it's going to sell as well. Let's not forget that, you know, so that be really critical to the relevance of what it is you've got to your audience, and that will improve your inbound. I think, I'm not saying we've got it perfect, but you need to be honest and critical about it. Doesn't need to be big. Focus on specific niche, you know, the whole Zulu principle thing, and make sure that when you're looking at that, you're looking at the customers that are interested in that, and that's how you're trying to attract your inbound.
And I think also, just absolutely agree with what you just said, Ollie. The other thing for me is making sure that there's good alignment of everybody knows exactly what that USP is and the value proposition is. We've recognised that internally recently, that, okay, we're not doing as good a job. You have different ideas. Yeah, well, or we hadn't had it as well defined as we thought. But so it's about getting the commercial or sales team aligned on that and really clear on that, but also sharing that with the rest of the business, I think, so that they, you know, they understand the angle that we're coming from when we're talking, you know, from a technical expertise standpoint, or, you know, from a policy and regulation perspective, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you've both said, and I think that hopefully answers some of Chris's question, which was, you know, how do you cut through the norm when selling something in a large industry, but you feel you have a strong USP that makes you different? that people haven't thought of or know about. Well, it really is about exploring that. What is it that makes you different? Talk to your customers, get them to tell you what is different, because it might actually be different to what you think. And I couldn't agree more with the whole kind of niching piece as well. I think that it's scary for some for some agency businesses in particular to go niche, but it's probably the best thing you can do. Jane Langley and Flynn have said similar question. So any views on collaborative partnerships to enhance sales? Very good question. And then linked to that is about kind of paid referral arrangements. But yeah, let's talk a bit about partnerships, because I think that, referral partnerships can be the cornerstone of a business's sales strategy if they want it to be. I don't know if either of you've got any experience of that. Ollie, you probably do, don't you, with Compare Your Footprint?
Yeah, we have different models. So we have a referrals model for sure. Yeah. So we work in two ways. So there's through partnership and there's end user licenses. So an end user license is someone who can obviously go straight on and use the software as a self-service software and use it for themselves. But then we also have partnerships, and we have, I guess, 3 different formats of partnership. One is a pure white label, so complete rebrand, reproductization, I guess, of whatever it is for the purpose of that business. The other is through consulting arrangement. So that's less of a complete rebrand and remake of that product, but more a case that they want to use it for their own purposes in, let's say, a service wrap. So it'll be a tool, like a part of their toolkit, the consultant. And the third one is referrals, and we call them ambassador agreements. But yeah, where we have people that we have a kind of like a selection process, more or less. We just need to make sure there is that alignment. We talked quite strongly about mission and purpose in this, so we need to make sure the ambassadors are aligned in that. And then those ambassadors are our referral network, and they tend to be people who maybe sort of, in our case, champions of their industry. So they're not always directly motivated by financial gain. Again, it'll be more that they see value by association. So they like and they're willing and interested, and it's part of their natural language and what they do in their day-to-day. They're the kind of referral partners we have. They're called sort of champions in their area of industry. Yeah. Does that answer that?
I think it does. I think it comes back to that match fit, doesn't it? So I think, having a more strategic approach and maybe a smaller number of initial partners to then learn from is probably a good way of starting. Laura, do you have anything to add?
No, just that we're so partnerships will be a strong channel for us. So certainly as we are planning to launch or explore the launch in the US, I think it's the main approach that we want to be using. So partnering up with, market knowledge expertise in the new market, but, with our technical expertise. So it's just, we're in the early stages of that, but it's, definitely an important channel for us.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
I have an open question as well, really, because interested in the person's question as well, but put it out there. So if I would say to you that the best way for us to, if we could scale and do everything we needed just by end user licenses, maintaining complete control of the conversation from start to finish, then I would do that. So the question is, why do I use referrals? The idea is hopefully that I get scale from those partnerships in a way that I wouldn't be able to do from just taking the end user license approach, which would be preferred. So the challenge, of course, is with any partnership, whether it's through consulting partnerships or white referrals, is like with anything in franchising, as similar, or any licensees, is how do you make sure that they're selling? So that's quite tricky, because you end up moving from a business that is directly involved in the conversation end to end to being a business that has to manage referral partners in the hope that they will treat your products in the right way, you follow your mission and values in the right way, and most importantly, actually have some activity, a level of activity that's you hope it's going to happen. So it kind of changes the profile a bit of your business, depending if you end up swinging completely to just referral, and partnerships versus end users. So it's just a thought. I've been thinking about it a lot. It plagues my head all the time. I'm like, so which is the best mix here? You know, will we end up actually being, because it's quite a different business model, the model of managing people who sell on your behalf outside of your organization versus direct control of the sales conversation. So, you know, it's just a point I put out there to everyone on this.
Just unmuted myself. I meant to mute. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ollie. And I think it's something that sometimes isn't considered until after the fact. And it's like, we can build all these great partnerships, but actually you say you've then got to service them. You've got to make sure that they're representing the business in the best possible light. And they are intensive, time intensive. And I think that's probably, you know, maybe the point to sort of end on, and kudos to everybody here today and anyone who's watching this who are in sales and business development at the moment, because, you know, it's hard work. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes persistence. It doesn't matter which sales channel you're focusing on. It is all about that consistency and underpinning everything with your mission and purpose. So I think today's been brilliant. There's been so much. Thank you, Ollie and Laura, particularly because you had to stand in for Jess, so we didn't have a sort of third opinion. But it's been so interesting to me. We've had some really, really useful discussions. And I think good comments in the chat, but I think it's been a huge value for everybody that has attended today. Lots of food for thought for me anyway, to take away. So I'm going to wrap up now because it's 2 minutes past 1 and I said we'd finish at 1 o'clock. So thanks so much, Laura and Ollie, for your contributions today and your time. I really appreciate it. I will send the recording round to you all so you can watch it again and look out for a couple of insight pieces about this session. And yeah, I hope to see you again at another Lunch and Learn very soon. So thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, bye.